You haven't felt like yourself in a while, not because you've changed, not because you've fallen, but because something inside you has gone quiet, like a fire that used to light your chest from the inside out, has dimmed to a flicker you can barely feel. You keep moving, keep showing up, keep doing what's expected, but somewhere along the way, something in you stopped burning. And maybe you've told yourself, it's just life, just age, just fatigue, but deep down, you know better. Because this isn't just tiredness, it's spiritual suffocation. It's like something is pressing down on your soul, not loud, not obvious, just enough to make you go silent, just enough to make you pull back, just enough to make you stop reaching for God the way you used to. And maybe the scariest part isn't what you feel, it's what you don't. You don't feel that urgency to pray. You don't feel that trembling when you hear His name. You don't feel that clarity that once cut through your confusion. You don't feel that pull toward the Word. You don't feel like the person you used to be. But hear this, what you're experiencing is not natural decline. It's not burnout. It's not a phase. It's not just age or circumstance. It's a targeted spiritual operation designed to extinguish your flame. Because what you're carrying is light, real light, heaven-lit light. And light like that never dies easily. It has to be put out. You think you just grew cold, but something, or someone, has been working to smother you from the inside out. Not by force, not by trauma, but by weight, by pressure, by distraction, by shame, by whispering thoughts that slowly convinced you that your voice doesn't matter anymore, that your calling was just a phase, that your fire was always emotional, that you've run your race, and there's nothing left to burn. But it's a lie. And the reason it feels so heavy is because it's not just psychological. It's spiritual warfare dressed up as emotional fatigue. Because the devil doesn't fear loud Christians, he fears lit ones. He fears the people who've been broken but still burn, who've walked through fire and came out carrying some of it inside, who don't need a stage to shift atmospheres. They just need a room, a voice, a whisper, a prayer that no one hears, but heaven responds to. And that's who you are. Or at least, who you were before you got tired of trying to keep the fire alive on your own. You see, what many don't realize is that spiritual flame isn't just emotion or passion. It's evidence of activity inside you that hell fears. And so, like any fire, if it can't be flooded all at once, the enemy tries to cut off the oxygen. Slowly, silently. He doesn't need to destroy your faith. He just needs to exhaust your spark. And he does it through guilt, through shame, through long seasons of silence where your prayers don't bounce back with miracles, through making you feel like it's pointless to keep reaching when nothing seems to change. And without even realizing it, you begin to adapt. You lower your expectation. You stop crying out like you used to. You settle into a muted version of your faith, one that functions but doesn't flame. And yet, even in that numbness, there's something still alive inside you, something that refuses to fully go dark, something that aches in the silence, something that wants to believe again, even if it's afraid to, something that knows this is not who I am. Because your soul was not made for silence. You were born of fire. Paul knew this when he wrote to Timothy, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you. Why would he say that? Because the fire hadn't died. It had just been covered. And Paul didn't tell Timothy to ask for a new gift. He told him to wake up the one that was already there. Because God doesn't remove what he plants. He doesn't withdraw the light he lit. But he does call you to remember it, to return to it, to fight for it. And sometimes that starts with simply admitting, I've gone dim. Not because I stopped loving God, not because I've failed, but because something has been slowly smothering my flame, and I forgot I still had permission to burn. So now the question isn't, where did my fire go? The question is, what has been trying to put it out? Is it fear? Is it fatigue? Is it unhealed pain? Is it the voice that says, you've missed your chance? Because whatever it is, it's not from God. He didn't give you a spirit of fear. He didn't call you to spiritual quietness. He didn't light your soul just to watch it fade, and He's not waiting for you to explode with passion again. He's waiting for you to remember that the spark is still in there, even if it's buried under ashes, even if it hasn't moved in months, even if all you feel right now is hollow, because it only takes one breath for God to bring it back. And if you're still here, still breathing, still aching, then the fire is not dead. It's just waiting to be fed again. Somewhere along the way, you stopped asking where the heaviness came from. You just started accepting it. You told yourself it was life. Maybe you even said it was maturity, a natural settling down after years of intensity. You got tired of chasing feelings, tired of always being on fire, tired of hoping that this time the prayer would bring the breakthrough. So, you adjusted. You lowered your voice. You stopped expecting to feel close to God every day. You started calling the silence peace. You started calling the numbness normal. But that heaviness, that sense that something inside you got smaller, quieter, more afraid, that didn't come from God. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, which means something did. Something entered, not with horns or violence, not with obvious rebellion, but with whispers, with doubt, with subtle emotional weight. It didn't possess you. It didn't have to. It just learned how to sit in the same room as you and speak. And over time, you started believing it. That voice that said, "You should just be quiet." The one that said, "No one cares what you carry." The one that said, "You're too much or not enough." The one that told you your fire made people uncomfortable. The one that made you feel small when you were once bold. That's not your voice, and it's definitely not God's. It's a spirit, a spiritual agent of silence, a commissioned force of fear that was sent to dismantle the structure God once built inside you. And it doesn't show up as rage or sin. It shows up as reluctance, as passivity, as chronic fatigue with no diagnosis, as emotional shutdown during worship, as blank stares during prayer, as numb hands that used to shake with power. And if you're not trained to recognize it, you'll start adapting to it. You'll start building your identity around what's oppressing you. You'll say, "I'm just tired. I'm just not emotional like I used to be. I'm not called to be loud. I've outgrown that zeal." But what if you haven't outgrown your fire? You've just been conditioned to hide it. What if the spirit sitting on your chest every night isn't depression, but opposition, not a chemical imbalance, not personality change, but a spiritual presence assigned to your dimming, and its job is not to destroy you. That would be too obvious. Its job is to keep you functional, but empty, moving, but hollow, surviving, but silenced. Because if it can convince you that silence is safer than flame, you'll start calling obedience overreaction. You'll start calling caution wisdom. And you'll begin to extinguish the parts of you that once made hell nervous. The Bible never said the Spirit would come as a scream. It might feel like a fog, like the desire to stay quiet when you used to speak up, like the instinct to shrink when something in you used to stand tall. That's how spiritual fear works. It's not always terror. It's inhibition, and it's lethal, because it's subtle. That's why Paul didn't say, "You're feeling discouraged. Cheer up." He said, "God did not give you that spirit." He called it out. Because spiritual freedom begins when you realize not everything you feel belongs to you. Some things were given, but not by God. Some emotions have been sitting on your soul for years, masquerading as personality, when in reality they are assignment, sent to drain, delay, dismantle, and destroy. And if you don't identify the intruder, you'll start treating your oppression like it's a design flaw. You'll say, "Maybe I'm just not strong like I thought I was. Maybe I was never really called. Maybe my season is over." But those thoughts didn't come from you, and they sure as hell didn't come from heaven, because the same Spirit who set you on fire doesn't change his mind. He didn't call you to start strong and then fizzle out in disappointment. He didn't fill you with boldness just to watch you be drained by guilt. He didn't light you with purpose just to let you sit in darkness. So, where did this spirit of fear come from? It came from a recognition of who you are. Hell doesn't fight what isn't a threat. This fear, this hesitation, this dullness. It came because your light was too effective, because your worship was too loud, because your prayers started breaking things in places you couldn't even see. Because when you opened your mouth, something shifted in the room, and the enemy had to make sure that stopped. And what better way to do that than to make you second-guess your own flame, make you think you were just too intense, too sensitive, too spiritual, too dramatic, until you agreed to pull back, until you started setting yourself on dim just to make others comfortable. But you were never meant to be a dimmer switch. You were born to burn. So now, the question isn't, why don't I feel like I used to? The question is, what have I allowed to stay in the room with me? Because whatever has been sitting silently on your shoulders, quietly convincing you to reduce your glow, it's not from God, and it doesn't belong. Not in your soul, not in your mind, not in your calling. God didn't give you that spirit, which means it's trespassing, and it's time to evict it. You didn't give up all at once. You slowed down. You got quieter. You said, "It's just for now. I need a break." You stopped praying with the same intensity. You stopped expecting answers. You stopped showing up with fire and started showing up with just enough breath to not disappear. Not because you didn't care, but because you were exhausted. And somewhere along the way, you stopped fighting not out of rebellion, but because you stopped remembering why you were fighting in the first place. You forgot what you carry. That's how darkness wins. Not by overpowering your light, but by making you believe that you don't have any left. And that belief, it changes everything. Because if you believe your fire has gone out, you'll stop tending it. You'll let it grow cold. You'll let ashes settle on top of it. You'll even apologize for ever having been so loud about it. That's the tragedy. When those who were once torches in the night start pretending they were never lit at all. But the truth is, you didn't burn out. You were dimmed. And there's a difference. Burning out means you gave everything until there was nothing left. But being dimmed means someone or something convinced you to shrink, to pull back, to lower the volume, to let guilt and fear wrap around your voice like a noose. And what's worse is that you started calling it wisdom. You told yourself, "I'm just being mature now. I don't want to make noise. I don't need to be emotional." It was a phase, but inside, something died. Not because it was weak, but because it wasn't fed. Your flame didn't die because it wasn't real. It flickered because it was isolated. You stopped surrounding yourself with others who burned. You stopped going to places where you felt God breathing. You stopped giving your gift oxygen. And over time, your own silence became a cage. The most dangerous thing that can happen to someone who once burned with divine fire is to believe they were never meant to burn in the first place. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. He doesn't want to destroy you. He wants you to forget who you were when you were dangerous. He wants to erase the memory of the moments when your voice pierced through the dark, when your prayers broke through in places others were too scared to go, when your worship made the room feel like heaven was watching. You think you were too much? You were exactly enough, and hell hated it. So it came for your identity, not by accusation, but by erosion. Not, "You're not worthy," but "Maybe you should tone it down." Not, "You're not called," but "You don't have the same fire anymore." Not, "God left you," but "That season is over now." And slowly, you believed it, not because you didn't love God, but because you stopped recognizing the version of you that was once full of power. But that version of you wasn't fake. It wasn't hype. It wasn't immature. It was the version of you that actually remembered who you were in the eyes of God. The version that hadn't been silenced yet. The version that walked into rooms with authority because heaven was still loud inside you. That version isn't gone. It's buried under disappointment, under fear, under a mountain of delay and discouragement, but it's still there. Because fire from heaven doesn't get extinguished, it gets smothered. And anything smothered can be uncovered. You've spent so long managing your pain that you forgot you once managed power. You used to lead spiritual environments. Now you sit quietly in the back, hoping someone else will take the mic. You used to pray with violence. Now you nod politely during altar calls. You used to expect heaven to show up. Now you hope just to make it through without falling apart. But here's the truth. No one told you. Your fatigue is not your failure. It's your fire misdirected. You're not dead. You're dormant. Because inside every weary believer is a warrior who once remembered who they were and can remember again. You were never meant to live dimmed. You were never designed to operate at half capacity. You were never created to bow to fatigue and call it wisdom. You were born to burn, to carry fire in your bones, to walk into dry places and set them ablaze again. But how can you do that when you feel empty? The same way a candle lights another, even with a tiny flame, it still transfers heat. You don't need to feel explosive. You just need to be willing to uncover what got buried. And here's what the enemy doesn't want you to realize. Even if you've forgotten who you are, even if your hands shake when you lift them, even if you haven't prayed with passion in years, your flame still responds to one thing: breath. Not your strength, not your performance, not your perfection, just a breath from the Spirit and a whisper from your soul that says, I want it back. I miss what I had. I'm ready to burn again. That's all it takes. Because God never withdrew His gift. You did. You buried it under silence. But He's still here, still breathing, still fanning your chest, with a presence that refuses to give up on you. And if you'll let Him, He'll show you that your silence was never who you were. It was just who you became when you forgot how much your fire mattered. And it still matters. Somewhere deep inside, you've whispered the question you were too afraid to ask out loud. Why does it feel like God stopped noticing me? You wouldn't say it in prayer. You wouldn't tell anyone at church. But there it sits, buried beneath the spiritual effort, hidden under the worship, hiding in the quiet corners of your disappointment. You keep doing what you were taught to do. You keep serving, keep showing up, keep believing. But if you're honest, there's a cold space inside your chest that used to feel like fire. It's not rebellion. It's not unbelief. It's unanswered ache. And it's been there so long, you've stopped trying to fight it. You've adapted to it. You've told yourself, this is just part of maturity. You don't feel everything all the time. But what if I told you, it's not maturity, it's not silence, it's not distance, it's resistance. What you're feeling is not God ignoring you. It's the weight of an invisible war designed to make you think you've been forgotten. But you haven't been. You've been targeted. Because when hell knows what your fire can do, its only chance is to cut off your oxygen before you light something again. That's why your prayers felt like they stopped working. That's why your worship lost its edge. That's why you started to feel like a spectator in your own faith. It wasn't God stepping back. It was opposition stepping in. Remember what the angel said to Daniel? From the first day you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. Not the 10th day, not after fasting, not when he felt something. The first day. But still, it took 21 days for the angel to reach him. Why? Because the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. That's the part we forget. We think delay equals silence. We think unanswered prayers mean heaven closed its ears. We think fire dying down means God moved on. But sometimes the delay isn't about God not speaking. It's about the spiritual war trying to keep you from hearing. And that war isn't always loud. It often shows up as exhaustion, as discouragement, as blank stares in worship, as a desire to stay quiet when you used to prophesy, as a numbness that makes you feel like your time has passed. But God didn't pull away. You just walked into enemy territory, and your presence activated resistance. Because when you carry fire, even your stillness is a threat. When you carry oil, even your whispers scare the dark. So if you've felt underwhelming, unimportant, invisible, hear me. That's not your reality. That's your warfare. You're not empty. You're opposed. And you're not opposed because you're weak. You're opposed because you're full of something that still scares the enemy. And the devil doesn't fight what doesn't burn. That's why he came for your voice. That's why he's tried to make you question your gift. That's why he's filled your mind with thoughts like, maybe I was just emotional. Maybe I'm too old to still be this on fire. Maybe it was just a season, and I missed it. But those aren't your thoughts. They were inserted, planted like seeds during your weakest moments, to convince you that it's safer to shrink than to stand. But here's the truth. The attack against your fire is evidence of your worth. Spiritual warfare is not random. It is precise. It is intentional. It is hell's strategic attempt to silence what heaven has blessed. So if you're feeling silenced, it's not because heaven left. It's because hell remembered who you were before you forgot. It remembered your boldness, your purity, your hunger, your obedience. It remembered how your prayers shifted rooms, how your fire lit other people, how your voice carried weight even when you didn't feel qualified. And hell knew if you ever remembered that again, everything would start burning around you. So it came for your memory, not by erasing it, but by surrounding it with fatigue, by making the past feel like a fantasy, by making you believe you've changed too much to ever go back. But it's a lie. God never removes fire. He hides it in dark places, not to punish you, but to protect it from being extinguished before it's ready to roar again. You think you're out of your prime? He thinks you're finally in position, because fire doesn't burn wild forever. Sometimes it must sit buried in embers, protected, hidden, untouchable, until the right wind comes. And maybe, just maybe, that wind is here. That breath is now. That moment you've been aching for is rising beneath the ashes you stopped checking. Because resistance never shows up for what's weak. It shows up for what's about to rise. So if the enemy has surrounded your fire with silence, if he's buried you in shame, if he's convinced you to stop asking, stop pressing, stop burning, that means your flame still matters. It means your voice still scares him. It means the room still shifts when you walk in. It means you were never forgotten. You were feared. And it's time to remember what that fear was about. The saddest thing about being spiritually attacked is not that you feel weak. It's that you start believing that your weakness is your identity. You start saying things like, I'm just tired. I don't hear God like I used to. My season is probably over. You stop praying like you used to because it feels hollow. You stop singing from your gut because it feels fake. You stop hoping, not because you've lost faith in God, but because you've lost faith in yourself. But what if I told you, you were never the source of the flame to begin with? You didn't light yourself. You didn't anoint yourself. You didn't assign yourself. That fire that used to make your heart shake, it was breathed into you by a spirit who doesn't change his mind, by a father who doesn't cancel callings because of your fatigue, by a savior who never once looked at your silence and thought, I made a mistake choosing you. He never left. He never withdrew the oil. He never took back the fire. You just stopped reaching for it because somewhere in your disappointment, you stopped believing you were still allowed to carry that much glory. You made peace with your silence. You normalized your numbness. You began calling survival strength. And in truth, you were just hiding. But here's the beauty of fire. You don't need to create it again. You only need to stir it. That's why Paul didn't say to Timothy, beg God for more power. He said, stir up the gift that is already in you, because it never left. It was just buried beneath months, years, decades of spiritual weight, beneath betrayal, beneath disappointment, beneath routines that became prisons, beneath a mask you wore for so long that even you started to believe it was your face. But right here, right now, something is shifting. Because deep under all that numbness, you feel it, don't you? The flicker, the faint warmth, that ache that says, I remember what it felt like to burn. That's not nostalgia. That's not emotion. That's your calling, waking up. And it's not asking for perfection. It's not waiting for you to pray for 5 hours or fast for 40 days. It's asking for permission. Permission to come out of hiding. Permission to stop shrinking. Permission to stop carrying shame for being tired. Permission to remember that fire was never about volume. It was about presence. It's not the noise that breaks chains. It's the oil. It's the authority in your whisper. It's the weight of your walk. You used to walk with weight. You used to enter rooms and atmospheres shifted. You used to say one sentence and hearts cracked open. And now you feel like all of that is lost? No, it's waiting, not to be earned, but to be uncovered. The enemy didn't steal your flame. He just convinced you to stop fanning it. He made the wilderness feel like a graveyard, but it wasn't. It was a forge. God wasn't punishing you with silence. He was rebuilding you in private, so that when you burned again, you wouldn't just be a spark, you'd be a torch. You weren't forgotten, you were hidden for the sake of the fire inside you. Because that kind of fire needs time. It's not loud hype. It's slow burning oil. It's character under pressure. It's truth that pierces without shouting. It's love that burns away chains. It's the kind of light that doesn't just warm the room, it transforms it. And that's the light you were born to carry. So now, with the ashes still on your hands, and the silence still fresh in your ears, and the memories of numbness still echoing in your chest, I dare you to whisper, "Light me again." Not for show, not for applause, not for spiritual hype, but because you miss who you were when you burned without fear. Because somewhere in the ashes, somewhere under the tired days and unspoken nights, you still know you were made for fire. And this time, it won't be borrowed. It won't be a phase. It won't burn out in a month. Because now, you know what it costs. You know what it means to be dimmed. And you know what it takes to stay lit when the storm tries to drown you. You're not going back to who you were. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Refined, restored, reignited. Not louder, but deeper. Not emotional hype, but sacred heat. So let the spirit breathe again. Let the ashes fall. Let the wind rise, because your silence is over and your flame is ready. This is not revival. This is resurrection.